let's dive back in.
I'm claustrophobic. I got anxiety. I don't want to do nothing to them.
I'll roll the window down.
I'll roll the window down.
When I start breathing, it's gonna go off on me, man.
Pull your legs in.
Okay. Let me count to 3. Let me count to 3. I'm going in. Please.
Let me count to 3. I'm going in.
I'm not trying to win.
He says, let me count to 3, then I'm going to go in. Let me count to 3, I'm going to go in. He's trying to cooperate, but he's having a breakdown, right? He's having a nervous mental breakdown. Have you ever had a panic attack or an anxiety attack in your life? I think most people have. One of the worst feelings in the world. You literally think that you're going to die. I've had it many times. You know, it's something that you have to work through. It's something that drugs and alcohol will, of course, exacerbate. But this is very common in police situations, especially when you're part of a group that has traditionally and historically been sort of oppressed by law enforcement, right? From George Floyd's view, from his world, the world that he lived in, his version of reality is different than yours and mine. It's not the same. If we think it's the same, then we're going to be missing a lot to this story. We're going to be missing the context. How is he viewing this? From his view, cops kill black people. That's it. So he is looking at this as sort of the grim reapers are upon him. They're pulling him out of his car. They're taking him, putting him in somewhere else, and he's going to be dead, you know, and he knows that. And he actually happened to be right here. He is dead, and the cops are the ones who did it. So he was 100% right. Any of these other commentators I see and hear sort of bemoaning the fact that he was on drugs or alcohol or he was messed up, the guy was 100% right. He got it. He hit the nail right on the head. He was right. He said he was going to die, and they killed him. So drugs or alcohol or whatever, the guy was perceptive as hell. The cops couldn't figure it out. He knew what was going to happen next.
Yeah, I get on the ground, anything. I can't stand this, man. He know it.
Okay, so we're going to go around the other side. So this is Officer Lane. Now he's going to pull him through the vehicle. So watch.
I'm claustrophobic. I'm telling you, but you're not working with me. God, I'm claustrophobic, man.
I'm claustrophobic. Please don't. This goes on for a little while. So he's now finally getting in the car. Now, see his hands behind his back? He's getting yanked on him. Oh, yeah. Ow. Right there. That is very painful. Now, George Floyd's going to come all the way out the other side. Okay, now he's back on the other side. He's coming out of the vehicle. And then they get him on the ground. So this is where it all sort of picks up. So now the passerbys. All right, it becomes kind of difficult to watch at that point just because we're not seeing anything. The actual body camera is sort of being obscured by all of the officers who are piling onto George Floyd. And so that's kind of the rest of that officer's video. The other video is really, you know, a lot more of the same. So we have Officer Keung, I believe. We have his body camera footage. Also, it's a lot longer. It's about 18 minutes, but it doesn't really reveal, I think, much else that we need to see. You know, it's basically the same thing from a different angle. He talks to a few other people, and it's not good. Now, the one thing that does come out of that video, and this is something that the Daily Mail actually picked up on, is as this is all happening, we see from Officer Keung, so we see from this gentleman, and I want to make sure we know who it is. We see from this fellow right here, this is Officer Keung, who you may remember, he's actually been called out in grocery stores and things like that, right? Remember that guy? This guy's picture right here, he was in, you know, Whole Foods or something like that shopping, and some lady came up to him and, you know, why are you here? Nobody wants you here. What are you doing in here? You killed that man. Like, get the hell out of here. And, you know, I'm not an advocate for blowing people up in grocery stores, but I do really despise the fact that a lot of these officers, they try to hide behind the mask of anonymity, and they shouldn't be able to do that. You know, this guy was charged with a crime. This guy killed somebody who was involved in a killing of somebody else. And many times they just sort of skate away. And I've got other articles that I want to get to today. I'll show you where the actual officers are, you know, they're named, but there's no pictures, there's no identifying information. They do it to hide from accountability. So I just like to make sure that we know who these people are. And so Officer Keung is now, he's got his own body camera footage. I did not go through that, but as he is in this entire incident, so take a look at what the Daily Mail was able to screenshot and capture. here is George Floyd on the ground. They just pulled him out of the other side of the vehicle, right? So he came out of the vehicle from this angle, so this door area, right? He's pulled out of the vehicle right here. They pull him out and they lay him down on the ground right here. And Officer Keung sees, uh-oh, there's a pebble. Well, there's a pebble in my police tire. Well, that's out of place. I don't like when things are out of place. I like things to be orderly. I like things to, follow the rules and follow the law. So what does he do? He picks it up, he pulls it out of the tire, and he just flicks it away. So when you watch that actual body camera footage, that's what he's doing. Meanwhile, by the way, George Floyd is just laying here right here. That looks like somebody's neck or knee or something like that on his neck. So in other words, somebody is being murdered right in front of this officer, and he's concerned about picking a pebble up out of a tire. Like, this is how routine this is. This is how desensitized these people are to this entire process. We have a man who's having a mental breakdown, an emergency. He's saying, I'm going to die, and he's right about that. But as this is all taking place, he just goes and he just picks up a little pebble. Oh, well, that's inconvenient. Let me get rid of that. Meanwhile, a man is dying right in front of your very eyes. And so right now there's a lot of commotion. There's a lot of conversation that's taking place about, well, what does this mean? Are these guys actual murderers? Did they go out there with, this premeditated intention that they're going to go kill somebody? And a lot of the commentators are sort of saying no, right? There's no evidence of that. There's no indication that this is what they were doing or what they were involved with. And I happen to agree, right? I haven't seen any facts that said that any of these guys woke up and said that they're going to go kill George Floyd or somebody today. Like, there's just no evidence about that. But there are other types of murder. Okay, just because it's not premeditated doesn't mean that it's not murder. There's all different categories of murder: first degree, second degree. You've got, manslaughter charges and all those different things. But you've got, somebody dies, there are criminal charges related to that. I've already gone through the statutes for these particular officers. I covered that in a previous show, and we're not going to do that again today. But as I was watching this pebble incident, this situation where an officer just picks up a pebble, throws it out while this chaos is going on in front of him while somebody is dying, it reminded me of a particular charge that we learned about in criminal law in law school. It was this idea of what's called depraved heart murder. Okay, so this was this concept that actually has a Wikipedia article here if you want to look it up. But it says that it is known as depraved indifference murder. It's a type of murder where an individual acts with a depraved indifference to human life, where such act results in death. Not explicitly intending to kill, but it was so bad, like it was the risk of death and bodily harm is great enough that ignoring it demonstrates a depraved indifference to human life, and the resulting death is considered malice of forethought. So in other words, malice of forethought is sort of the predicate for murder. If you have malice of forethought, that means that you had thought. It's an old phrase from Old English, but it basically means you thought about killing somebody. You had intentional desire to. You had malice in your mind, and you thought about it prematurely. So this is kind of an old concept, depraved heart murder. A lot of these originated in sort of the old tradition of law. They've now been codified, and there now are statutes: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter. All of those different things have been categorized, but this is one of the originals. So this comes back from sort of the common law study, what they were doing in England, this idea that you can still murder somebody by just showing just a total indifference to human life. And the article here says that in some states it constitutes second-degree murder, while in others it would be charged with varying degrees of manslaughter or third-degree murder. So it's a murder charge. And when I saw this video, this is exactly what I thought of. I don't remember what the specific statute was in George Floyd's case or what these guys were particularly charged with. Already covered that in a previous show. But here, it just sounds like it fits. These guys were so calloused. They said, we'll put the windows down. You're going in, do what I say. And they pull him out by the back of his shoulders, kind of dislocating his shoulders in real time, throw him on the ground. And while this is all happening, while he's pleading for his mom, while he's saying, I can't breathe, while he's begging for water, he picks a pebble up and just tosses it away. If that's not an indifference to human life, if that's not if that's not murder, I don't really know what is. So whether they call it first degree or second degree, that is going to be up to that court and that location and that particular jurisdiction. But the video is pretty bad. I don't think that it helps the government in any way. George was very upset, and rightfully so. And if anybody made a guesstimate on how this was going to go out, if they made predictions, George Floyd was the only one who got it right. Drugs or not. So we're going to see if they're actually held accountable. Now, is there a different way to handle this situation? Could these cops have done something differently? Because this is what I hear all the time from cops or from people who love the cops, the pro-cop supporters. Well, they're dealing with hardened criminals. They're dealing with people who want to kill them. They're dealing with, lunatics and criminals and addicts and gang members and all of these things on a constant basis. And so they're just acting the way they have to in order to get the job done. And I just think that's way too overbroad. You can't treat everybody the same. That's something that is sort of baked into just, good manners in a regular everyday society. I mean, we're always constantly ragging about stereotypes and racism and prejudice and prejudging people. And so for the cops to just show up on every single scene and just treat everybody like a criminal or a gang member is an insane way to do it, because most people are not that. Most people that the officers interact with are getting speeding tickets. They're getting slaps on the wrist. They're doing a welfare check. Most people are not these hardened criminals and insane, criminal masterminds. That's not the norm. The norm is the other way. So the norm, in my opinion, should be that we deal with people as people. We deal with addicts as people who are in a lot of pain. They're suffering. They're struggling. They need help. They don't need to be, manhandled by 4 officers and thrown in the back of a vehicle. So when I hear, defund the police, that is something in my mind that makes no sense at all, right? Doesn't make any sense, which is kind of a weird thing to be, for me to be saying. Like, why is a criminal defense attorney saying that defund the police is not a good idea? Because there is a place for them. There is a place that we need the police. They need to be doing what we need them to be doing. But what about these ideas of other entities or other divisions of a police department that is capable of engaging somebody like George Floyd, right? Or we've covered it many times. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. We covered it with Rayshard Brooks. We covered it with a lot of these people. Almost all of them. What if somebody came up to them and just said, listen, cop goes up to his window, says, this guy's having a breakdown. He's having a mental health crisis. We need to call somebody else who's better equipped to handle this situation. You bring in a nice, man or woman, somebody with experience dealing with trauma, somebody who's got experience dealing with this particular community, who views somebody with a gun and a badge as somebody who's there to kill them. We bring in somebody else with a different uniform, with a helpful hand. We're not here to arrest you. We're not here to kill you. We're not here to murder you. We're not going to take you to jail today. But we do need to resolve the situation. We need to pull you out of the car. Let's talk. Bring him a chair. Why don't they have a chair for him to sit in? There's a picture of him. They just threw him on the ground. Why are we not treating people with a little bit more humanity? And for those who come back on that and they say, well, that's expensive, that costs a lot of money. How are we going to pay for that? How much is this George Floyd thing costing the entire country and the world? I'm going to get to articles in our next segment about the LAPD or LASD, the sheriff's department, paying out $55 million for bad police officers. They've been sued for that. Bad policing is very, very expensive. You can run the numbers any which way you want to, but the idea that we treat people with more humanity is the better approach. So if anything comes out of these protests, and I still haven't heard a coherent thought on what they're even protesting anymore. I have no idea what they're doing. I thought it was about George Floyd. I thought it was about criminal justice reform. Now it seems like it's about overthrowing capitalism and burning down court buildings. No idea what that is about or what that means. But if there's anything that's going to be good that comes out of this, it's going to be maybe the idea that some of these police departments can treat people with a little bit more humanity and a little bit more compassion, and these types of situations won't have to occur anymore. If that means that it's not these officers who are employed and we bring in other people to do what needs to be done, then that's fine. These officers got to go. but there is a better way to handle it, and that is what I would like to see. George Floyd was a sick man. He had a really, really deep problem. He was distrustful of law enforcement. He had a good reason to be, because they killed him. He was totally vindicated. Unfortunately, it resulted in his life. So I'm really hopeful that there is more development with the movement that has come about as a result of his passing. We'd like to see some more progress, and we're going to keep covering the story, keep talking about justice reform, as long as you'll have us. So that's the end of that story. Thanks for letting me share that with you today.